by Assembly Member Bonnie Lowenthal.
Creator, help us to welcome each day as if it were our first, so that we may have enthusiasm in our souls, excitement in our hearts, and warmth in our dispositions. Help us to welcome each day as if it were our last, so that we may have an urgency in our efforts, a deep concern for the world in our minds, and the peace and love of the Creator in our hearts. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led today by Mr. Nilo. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. We move on now to the reading of the previous day's journal.
Assembly Chamber, Sacramento, Wednesday, March 10th, 2010. The Assembly met at 9:30 a.m. Honorable John A. Perez, the Speaker of the Assembly, presiding. Chief Clerk E. Dawson Wilson at the desk. Assistant Clerk Timothy Moore, the reading. The roll was called. Adams, Amiano, Anderson, Arambula, Bass, Bell, Bill Berryhill, Tom Berryhill, Blakesley, Block, Blumenfield.
Mr. Perez moves and Mr. Hagman seconds. Reading of the previous day's journal will be dispensed with. Presentation of petitions, there are none. Introduction and reference of bills will be deferred. Reports of committees will be deemed read and amendments deemed adopted. We have no messages from the Governor nor messages from the Senate. We move on now to motions and resolutions. Absences for today are for legislative business, Assembly Members Caballero, Evans, and and Assembly Member Valines. All are out on legislative business. We go on now to Mr. Torrico.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Under motion resolutions, I hereby request unanimous consent for Assembly Member Mendoza to have guests and photographers on the floor today.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to allow the following members to adjourn in memory of individuals today: Mr. Amiano, Mr. Arambula, Mr. Gilmore, Ms. Harkey, Mr. Huffman, Ms. Lowenthal, Mr. Monning, Mr. Portantino, Mr. Nielsen, and Mr. Valines.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to re-refer AB 1839 from the Revenue and Taxation Committee to the Education Committee and then back to the Revenue and Taxation Committee.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to re-refer SB 730 by Senator Wiggins from the Natural Resources Committee to the Rules Committee.
Without objection. Members, we will now recess regular session for purpose of convening 8th Extraordinary Session. Without objection, we will substitute the prayer pledge, other opening procedures in the regular session for our 8th Extraordinary Session. We're in recess. For regular session. We're now in 8th Extraordinary Session. Members, before we begin our business on the daily file, we have some special guests in the rear of chambers. Mr. Mendoza would like to introduce some executives who are visiting here from Univision. Are they prepared to be recognized? Yes. One moment, please. Members, before we take up our business on the daily file, Mr. Mendoza has requested permission to recognize guests in the rear of chambers from Univision. Mr. Mendoza, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, if I could have your attention just for a few moments, I would like to introduce some special guests that are on the floor. They represent Univision. In case you don't know who Univision is the premier Spanish language media company in the United States. Just recently, the Los Angeles station ranked number one in the nation, number one station in the country in any language among adults 18 to 49, period. Over the past 3 years, Univision has contributed over $1 billion in cash and in-kind services to our community. Univision provides more primetime airtime for public service announcements than any other network. For over 50 years, Univision has been the champion of Hispanics and Latinos in Los Angeles, Fresno, Sacramento, San Francisco, and Bakersfield. Their mission is to inform, entertain, and empower the Latino community. They launched two very important programs that are very vital to our community. As a former school teacher, they understand that education is the most important issue that affects our community. Univision partnered with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as well as the U.S. Department of Education, major community groups, civil rights organizations, and government agencies to launch Es El Momento. The moment is now. A groundbreaking 3-year, multi-billion-dollar multimedia campaign aimed at promoting a college-bound culture in the Latino community. The main objective of the campaign is to foster a stronger culture of high school completion and college readiness by educating and empowering and encouraging parents to be actively engaged in their child's education and providing them with the tools and resources they need to succeed. In addition, the census. Univision recognizes the important role the media will play in making sure that every person is counted. They leverage their platform and have expanded the Ya Es Hora, It Is Time campaign to focus on the 2010 census. Ya Es Hora, Hágase Contar, it's time. Make yourself be counted. Univision's approach for the 2010 census includes PSAs, a toll-free number, special TV programming, showing viewers how to fill out a form step by step, extensive news coverage, information on national and local public affairs, programs, and community events. The principle and the goal of the Ya Es Hora, Hágase Contar is to increase the response rates among Latino households in order to achieve a full Latino count in 2010. For that and much more that they do, I would like to take a moment to introduce each and every one of them in the back. They might be from your area. First, David Loving, Senior Vice President and Regional Director in Northern California. We have Maria Gutierrez, Vice President and General Manager of Fresno. Steve Stuck, Vice President and General Manager of Sacramento. We have Teresa Ford, Vice President and General Manager of Bakersfield. Maelia Masin, Vice President and General Manager of Los Angeles. Jose El Gorriaga, General Sales Manager of Fresno. Sandy Stretch, Director of Sales, San Francisco. George Ray, Political Specialist, Univision. And Ibelice Estrada, Senior Vice President, Corporate and Community Relations. Members, if we could please give them a big round of applause and take some pictures in the back and welcome them here to Sacramento. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza. Welcome to all of our guests in the rear of chamber. In addition, Mr. Nielsen has guests in the chamber this morning. Oh, pardon me, Mr. De Leon.
I just want to very briefly. I just want to echo my colleague, Mr. Mendoza's comments. But in particular, I want to point out Channel 34, Univision in Los Angeles. Channel 34, as Mr. Mendoza just mentioned, is the #1 news station in the nation. Now, when you take CBS, NBC, ABC, CNN, MSNBC, when you take the ratings and you compare it to Channel 34, without a doubt, it is the #1 news station in America. So I just want to say to Malia Masin, congratulations. Also to when you've seen a large surge of individuals who are one-time undocumented immigrants who played by the rules and became legal permanent residents eventually, and eventually naturalized U.S. citizens. And a handful of us who are part of this legislative body became members of this legislative body because we had a large surge of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands and millions nationwide who became U.S. citizens for the very first time. It is because of all the men and women who are present here today in Univision. Thank you to you. A lot of us are present here today. Muchas gracias. A special recognition.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. Mr. Nielsen, I believe you have guests in the chamber as well.
Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the Assembly, I'd like to acknowledge the Reading Elks RV Club here making a tour de force, a wonderful bunch of folks who enjoy their fellowship and communing and traveling around California. Good friends, wonderful people, the Elks RV Club, Reading.
Welcome. Without objection, the guest introductions will be considered part of our regular session. Members, without objection, we are returning to regular session in order to take up business under third reading. So we will recess extraordinary session, go back into our regular session. We are going to take up third reading items. Members, we are going into our third reading file. We will pass and retain on file items 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We will take up file item 9 by Mr. Smythe, ACR 118. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurring Resolution 118 by Assemblymember Smythe and others relative to Spay Day USA 2010.
Mr. Smythe, you may open.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, ACR 118 declared February 23rd as Spay Day in order to once again highlight the importance of spaying and neutering dogs and cats. More than 1,000 dogs and cats die every year in shelters, so it's important that we continue the education of our constituents.
Mr. Smythe, one moment, please. Members, we are conducting business on the daily file. If you would please conclude your conversations and return to your desk. Mr. Smythe is presenting on a resolution. Mr. Smythe, you may continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, in 2007 alone, over 500,000 dogs and cats were entered into shelters throughout the state of California, and more than half of them were euthanized. We also know with the housing crisis, more and more people are leaving their homes, and not only abandoning their homes, but abandoning their pets as well, and are then going into our shelters. Our local governments are struggling every year in trying to make ends meet, and the cost of operating local shelters is a continual burden on our local governments. So by passing this resolution, it will once again encourage and promote and talk about the importance of spaying and neutering our dogs and cats, and so that we can help not only reduce the costs of our local governments, but also certainly help save the lives of many of our animals throughout the state. I want to thank my colleagues both in the Senate and here in the Assembly as the Animal Protection Caucus for supporting and co-authoring this measure, and would like to ask that the first vote be held open for co-authors.
Thank you, Mr. Smythe. Ms. Yamada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Mr. Smythe, thank you very much for bringing this forward. I just wanted to take this opportunity to note that I'm privileged to represent UC Davis Vet Med, and want to thank them very much for their volunteer service on an annual basis on this important measure. Without them, we would not be able to take care of a lot of these issues right in our local area. So I want to thank all the veterinarians and the vet students at UC Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yamada. Seeing no further discussion or debate, Mr. Smythe has asked that the first roll be opened for co-authors. Clerk, please open the roll. This is for co-authors, members. This is for co-authors. The first roll is for co-authors. Clerk will close the roll. We have 61 co-authors. Mr. Smythe, we may take this up on a voice vote. Do you care to close?
Thank you. Just want to thank the co-authors and thank the sponsor of the resolution, the Humane Society of California, and along with the California Veterinary Society, as mentioned by my colleague from Davis. And again, thank you, members, for your co-authorship.
Thank you, Mr. Smythe. Members, we may adopt this resolution by voice vote. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. File item 10 is pass and retain. We move to file item 11 by Mr. Cotto. H.R. 25. Clerk will read.
House Resolution 25 by Assemblymember Cotto relative to National Problem Gambling Awareness Week.
You may open, Mr. Cotto.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. Members, H.R. 25 recognizes the week of March 7th through the 13th as National Problem Gambling Awareness Week and commend state agencies for raising public awareness of problem gambling. As all of us know, members, California is the nation's second largest gaming state, and we are expected to pass Nevada in terms of gambling receipts generated. Problem gambling, however, is also a serious public health issue which affects Californians of all ages, races, and ethnic backgrounds. It has significant societal and economic cost. Members, treatment for problem gambling minimizes the harm done to individuals and to society. Important efforts by state agencies and private organizations have significant positive impact and are to be commended. I just want to mention, members, that yesterday Assemblymember Mike Eng made an outstanding presentation at the Office of Problem Gambling's first California Problem Gambling Summit, which was a two-day conference here in Sacramento. National Problem Gambling Week brings important public awareness to the issues of problem gambling. Members, I request your vote on this important resolution.
Mr. Cotto, would you like co-authors on this? Mr. Anderson.
I have a question of the author.
Without objection.
Will you be opening this for co-authors?
Yes, thank you. Yes, I will.
With that, I'd like to add this is a great bipartisan bill. This is a huge issue, and I want to commend the author for bringing it forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Cotto, co-authors?
Yes, please, for co-authors, first roll call.
All right, members, we will open the first roll for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors, members. First roll is for co-authors. Clerk, please close the roll. We have 64 co-authors. Mr. Cotto, you may close on the resolution in chief.
Members, just respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you very much.
Members, we may adopt this on a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. We move on now to file item 12, ACR 107 by Ms. Torres. Clerk will read.
Assembly concurrent resolution 107 by Assemblymember Torres relative to California Public Safety Telecommunicators Week.
You may open, Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise to seek your support for Assembly Concurrent Resolution 107, which declares the week of April 11th, 2010, to be California Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, to recognize and honor the workers who staff and operate our 911 system. The 911 system is the first point of contact with the public safety and law enforcement agencies during an emergency. We depend on the 911 dispatcher to figure out what we need, where we are, and how to get an ambulance or a police officer or fire engine as fast as possible. Such was the case for a 7-year-old boy in Norwalk, California this week. He dialed 911 while he had barricaded himself with his little sister in a bathroom during a home invasion robbery. This brave little boy called for help, requested police officers as soon as possible, even requested soldiers to his home. Members, I wish I could play that 911 call for you here today. I'm currently aware of how much pressure there is for 911 dispatchers to get it right, to do it right, and to send proper assistance to the victims of crime or people who are in need of medical assistance. I am proud to be a part of a group that assures effective response for our neighbors, friends, and strangers during a time of need. I am proud to sponsor a resolution that acknowledges the operators of the emergency communication system in California for their judgment, their effectiveness, and their courage. I ask for your vote. And Madam Speaker, if I can ask for the first roll call to be for the purpose of adding co-authors.
Members, the first roll call will be open for co-authors. Seeing no further discussion on this matter, we will open for co-authors. Clerk will open the roll. This is for co-authors, members. Please add on for co-authors. Clerk will close the roll. We have 65 co-authors. Ms. Torres, you may close on the resolution. Do you care to close? Do you care to close on the resolution?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, thank you for your support.
Thank you. We may do this on a voice vote. All those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The resolution is adopted. Members, I have some Senate business. I don't have the floor managers listed. If you have been requested to take up a Senate bill on behalf of a senator, could you please let the desk know that you are presenting for them this morning? I'm referring to SB 4, SB 205, SB 88, and SB 220. Members, Ms. Brownlee is prepared to take up file item 13 for purpose of amendments. Members, please. Ms. Brownlee is prepared to take up file item 13 for amendments. SB 4, clerk will read.
Senate Bill 4 with amendments by Assemblymember Brownlee.
You may open on the amendments, Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I present amendments on Senate Bill 4, which seeks to ban smoking at state parks and beaches. These amendments specifically include three items. One, to exclude the Oceana Dunes State Vehicular Recreation Area, to exclude campsite areas at state beaches, and finally to clarify that enforcement shall be done with existing resources and not interfere with current duties of the State Parks Department. These amendments are designed to narrow and reduce the cost of the bill, and I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Members, we may adopt these amendments by a voice vote without objection. All those in favor, please signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print, back to file. File items 14, 15, and 16, or 14 and 15 are pass and retain. That takes us again to file item 16 and Ms. Brownlee, SB 205. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 205 by Senator Hancock, an act relating to education finance and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
You may open, Ms. Brownlee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. SB 205 authorizes the California State Finance Authority and the California Department of Education to allocate tax credits made available by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The bill passed unanimously several weeks ago and came back for further amendments. Under this program, districts and charter schools are allocated federal tax credits that result in either no or low-interest bond issuance or loans to renovate and build new school facilities. I respectfully ask for your aye vote again on this important measure.
Seeing no debate or discussion on this matter, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 64, no 0 on the urgency. Aye 64, no 0 on the measure. The measure passes. We move to file item 17 for purpose of amendment. Mr. Miller will take this up on SB 88. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 88 with amendments by Assemblymember Miller.
You may open, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The amendments to SB 88 deletes the current content of the bill and inserts language regarding firefighter specialty license plates. As proposed to be amended, SB 88 will eliminate the existing 60-day period in which the surviving spouse of a fallen firefighter must transfer a firefighter license plate into his or her name. This bill is sponsored by the California firefighters.
Okay. Without objection, we may take up these amendments by a voice vote. Member, all those in favor signify by aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print, back to file. Okay. Mr. Torrico? Members, we move now to file item 18, SB 220, for purpose of amendment. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 220 with amendments by Assemblymember Jones.
Mr. Jones, you may open.
Madam Speaker, members, I rise for purposes of amending SB 220 by Senator Yee. The amendments would delete the current contents of the bill and replace it with language relating to health insurance coverage of smoking cessation products and programs. The bill would then be referred back to the Rules Committee for referral to the Assembly Committee on Health, and also for us to request JBIRP to provide an analysis of the bill. I ask for your aye vote on the amendments.
Members, we will do a roll call vote on these amendments. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. This is on the amendments. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 20 on the amendments. The amendments are adopted. The bill is out to print, back to file. Mr. Torrico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Under motions and resolutions, I request unanimous consent to refer file item 18, SB 220 by Senator Yee, to the Rules Committee pursuant to Assembly Rule 97.
Clerk will note.
Madam Speaker, I request unanimous consent to refer file item 17, SB 88 by Senator DeSaulnier, to the Rules Committee pursuant to Assembly Rule 97.
Clerk will note. Members, once again, we will return to 8th Extraordinary Session. We have two items to take up in 8th Extraordinary Session today. But first we have second reading to be adopted. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 34 with amendments and Senate Bill 26 with amendments.
All bills are deemed read. Amendments are deemed adopted. Members, we now will take up without reference to file SB 34 by Mr. Padilla, Mr. Blumenfield, We'll take this up. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 34 by Senator Padilla, an act relating to energy and making appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
You may open, Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I rise today in support of this bill, SB 34 by Senator Alex Padilla. This bill has been introduced in the special session to connect as many as 15 solar, thermal, and photovoltaic projects to stimulus funds. We all agree we need to make sure we take down as much of the stimulus funds as we possibly can, and here is a bill that's going to allow us to do it in a way that promotes renewable energy. Collectively, the projects add up to more than 5,000 megawatts of renewable electrical generation to California's grid and will create more than 15,000 jobs. The key to eligibility for ARA funds, or stimulus grants, is that the projects must be under construction by the end of this year. Implicit in that requirement is that projects must be approved for siting. And what this bill does is it facilitates that siting. It provides an alternative mechanism for a developer to meet the California Endangered Species Act mitigation obligations. The developer will pay a fee to the Department of Fish and Game in lieu of securing mitigation on their own. Now, we're not cutting any corners in terms of environmental regulations. We're not relieving project developers of environmental protection obligations. But what this bill does, and just to give you assurances about that, look at the broad support that this bill has. It has the NRDC, it has the Chamber of Commerce, it has the building trades, it has an incredible array, a wide variety of folks who you don't normally see on the same side of the table. And we should commend Senator Padilla for really putting that group together. Specifically, what this bill will do is four things. One, it directs the Department of Fish and Game to develop a strategy and plan for the mitigation of wildlife impacts in the Mojave and Colorado deserts, supported by fees paid by the project developers. Second, it will eliminate legal communication barriers between the California Energy Commission and other agencies. Third, it will allow project developers to pay fees to support the hiring of third-party consultants by the Commission and to support the work of the Department of Fish and Game to process incidental take permits. And finally, what it does is it authorizes a recruitment and retention of differential pay program for siting division staff through the end of the year. Members, again, I want to stress this is a bipartisan bill. You've got Democrats, Republicans, Chamber of Commerce, environmental groups, and I urge your support so that we can not only move forward with renewable energy, but we can get as many jobs and as much stimulus money as we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blumenfield. Mr. Blakesley.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this piece of legislation as well. California is blessed with some of the most abundant natural resources in the nation, particularly with regard to renewable energy, and chief among them is the solar resource we have in Southern California. Now, we've worked for years to try and ascertain how we can fast-track the delivery of some of these solar resources and overcome some of the impediments and red tape that currently obstructs and restricts our ability to bring these resources online quickly. And although that's always been important, it's never been more important than right now, because we are potentially going to lose the opportunity to apply for upwards of $20 billion of ARA monies to offset 30% of the costs of approximately 15 projects that are scheduled to occur in this area if the permitting is not completed by December 31st of this year. Consider that for a moment. We're talking about 17,000 construction jobs, 2,000 permanent jobs, $56 million increase in property taxes, and the ability to significantly increase our ability to reach our renewable goals while reducing importation of high-cost natural gas electrical generation resources, which we need to reduce our reliance upon. We have an opportunity to address this issue through a simple mechanism known as an in-lieu fee, rather than requiring renewable generators and those that are working with the Department of Fish and Game to actually go out and obtain pieces of property which can take months to years to obtain to comply with the California Endangered Species Act, which requires mitigation for any incidental takes. This is a artful solution to a rather difficult and thorny problem. I urge all to consider the measure carefully because it will move us forward in our objective of having a cleaner environment while stimulating our economy. I urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Blakesley. Mr. Manuel Perez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I stand in support of this bill, and I want to thank Senator Padilla for his foresight and for his vision in bringing forth this measure. It's very important. We keep continuously hear about the green-collar economy and green jobs and what that actually means. Well, this is exactly what it means. It means renewable energy projects in this state have the potential to create thousands of green construction jobs, as well as encourage regional and local investment. Now, what does that look like on the ground? And some of this was referred to already. We're talking about more than 22 large renewable energy projects, the creation of 17,844 construction jobs, the creation of 2,774 permanent jobs, more than $1.3 billion in startup sales and property taxes, approximately $56 million in ongoing property taxes. This type of economic development is not only good for California, for our businesses, but also good for our communities, for our workers, and ultimately, at the end of the day, for Mother Earth and our climate. This bill will help the state reach its goal of qualifying renewable energy projects for federal stimulus funds before the end of 2010. By creating an expedited permitting and certification process, this bill ensures solar energy developers to qualify for these very important economic stimulus grants and does not compromise environmental safeguards. At stake are thousands of jobs and the successful development of a strong green-collar economy in California, particularly in the 8th Assembly District, where jobs are very much necessary for our folks back home. In Imperial County, once again, I'm looking at 30% unemployment rate. In Riverside County, I'm looking at 15% unemployment rate. This means right here with this measure, we can have approximately 8 solar projects in Imperial County that will create hundreds of jobs and hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars perhaps for the local economy. Members, I urge you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Mr. Adams.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support for this measure. There are elements of this bill that are not necessarily my cup of tea, but as a representative who has vast majority of the desert in their district, the unquestioned logic of making it easier to site solar facilities goes without some risk. The risk that we are going to endure is minimal compared to the great and wonderful amount of work that we can do both in PV and in solar thermal. I think Mr. Padilla's bill deserves your consideration, and I would urge an aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Mr. De Leon.
Go ahead.
Mr. DeVore.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This bill does have some interesting merits to it. However, it makes me rather frustrated to see that we are targeting this flexibility, this one-stop shop, these in lieu of fees, which are a good idea, but we're targeting it only to one method of generating energy. I'm struck by the fact that 7 years ago, a local power plant that was constructed in the high desert by Victorville, a state-of-the-art natural gas turbine generating power plant, won for Power Plant of the Year for the world. And the reason why it won had nothing to do with the fact that this power plant was advancing technology or was remarkable in any sort of specific way, but it won because it was sited in California. And it was such a shockingly unusual occurrence to actually have a decent-sized power plant come online in California that this power plant won for Power Plant of the Year for the world. Ladies and gentlemen, this state imports the largest amount of electricity of any state in America. We have the second highest electrical costs in America after Hawaii because of our policies limiting the construction of new power plants in this state. Now, I'm for anything that can generate power. We need everything. We need an all-of-the-above energy strategy. But the fact is that so-called green jobs, if you look at the nation of Spain, the push for green jobs in Spain, solar and power, resulted in the loss of 2.5 jobs for every so-called green job created. Now, we need the power, but if the power comes at the price of being more expensive than other lines of power, we are going to further shed manufacturing jobs like we saw with the NUMMI plant shutdown in Fremont. One of the factors in that shutdown, of course, was high energy costs. Ladies and gentlemen, this measure needs to be expanded so that we can expedite approval of other worthy projects in the state of California. So, yes, let's have some more solar power. But, ladies and gentlemen, we're losing 3,000 productive tax-paying citizens every week because of the red tape in California that we in this body could control and cut back. Please, let's get serious about every method of generating energy and creating jobs in the state of California, and let's not continue down this path of treating some things as more equal than others. California needs the electricity. We need the jobs. Let's go further than this measure, which I think, again, has some good merits, but doesn't go far enough.
Thank you, Mr. DeVore. Mr. Gaines.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise in opposition to this bill. I have some real issues with even mitigation fees. I think there ought to be an exemption of any sort of fee in a time of economic crisis when we've already set millions of acres aside in the state of California for mitigation purposes, and we're actually, that fee is going to be passed on to the consumer. And so we're going to increase electricity costs as a result of it. Every time we pay a mitigation fee to build a home in the state of California, you increase the cost of housing in the state. And I think this economy is in such an emergency state that we ought to be actually giving an exemption and not paying any mitigation fee for what I think is a worthy project. But because of the mitigation fees, I am in opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to say the only criticisms of this bill I hear is that it doesn't expedite it enough. Well, here is an opportunity. It does expedite things quickly. It will let us get the federal money that we need and create jobs and solar energy. So with that, I ask for your support. Or if your I vote. Thank you.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Aye 69, noes 1. On the urgency, aye 69, noes 1 on the measure. The bill passes. Members, I request unanimous Mr. Members, without objection, we will take up SB 26 by Senator Pavley. Mr. Garrick?
Please.
Republican caucus members. Members, those of you still here on the floor, if you could join me in welcoming Coyote Ridge Elementary School from Roseville. They are joining us in the upper gallery this morning. Welcome to our chamber.